So EDHV was one of the first interviews that we did that I really got inspired by, mainly because we'd interviewed Jürgen Bay earlier that week, and he had mentioned that as a designer you should specialize, and this was a common theme that we'd heard over and over again. And then we went to EDHV, and they're this multidisciplinary firm, and not only are they multidisciplinary, but they're actually successful at what they're doing, and they make interesting projects, and that was really nice to see because I felt like it was really in line with the kind of education that we're getting, where we're kind of good at a lot of things without being great at anything. And that made me uneasy during the trip for a long time, because everyone that we interviewed was saying, you got to specialize into interior design or product design, and then we made EDHV and they said, no, we actually enjoy being not specialized because you have the opportunity to work on multiple projects and it keeps you interested in what you're doing. So for me, it was really inspiring to see that, because it made me a lot more confident about the education that I'm getting. Even though it may not be the best, I feel like there's actually somewhere where I could get hired after this without having to go and specialize in something, and that was really good to see. So about halfway through the interview at EDHV, Remco van der Krat said, in the middle of another question response, he said, it's important to make ugly things. And we asked him about that later, and because we were confused, like, why would you purposely go and make something ugly? And he said, well, when you go into a project with the perspective that you're going to make it ugly, you sort of take this burden off of yourself of making things perfect and making things be a certain way. And it made a lot of sense to me, because I think so often when you go into a project, you're too scared to make a mistake and you're too scared to actually experiment, whereas when you're going in with this idea of, I'm going to make it ugly, you take this burden off of yourself of having to do things exactly the right way. And who knows, like he was saying, even if you try and make ugly things, there's a possibility that it'll come out beautiful in some way. So that was really nice to see. And for myself personally, it was great because I'm not very good at a lot of things, especially drawing and, working in 3D and working with my hands. So it's a nice perspective to have for myself when I'm doing things, because I feel like it'll take a burden off me. It'll make me more confident in experimenting in different fields. And it also, for me, linked to what Walter America at DAE said about staying true to yourself and not comparing yourself to other people around you. And what they said about making ugly things, it's like, well, yes, if I don't want to compare myself to other people, I'm just going to go make ugly things, and it's for me. And it doesn't matter if the person next to me is better at graphic design or drawing or whatever. I'm going to make this for myself, and I don't care if it's ugly because it's something that I made. De Mackersman was discussing their process of making the Cinderella table. What really struck me was their view and their explanation of making an expensive product. And what they said was, when you make an expensive product as a smaller design firm and as a firm that's starting up, the funding you get from it provides you with a lot of freedom to actually go and make other projects. And for me, that was really interesting to hear, because it was the kind of like the reality of design that you don't learn about until you actually talk to someone about it. And it kind of changed my perspective of viewing an expensive object, where I think it's worthwhile to do it if you are using the money you're getting from it as a way of like providing yourself with the freedom to work on other projects. And that was really interesting to hear, and that was definitely a perspective that I don't think you really get from a textbook or from reading about something like that online. Petra Blaise was definitely one of the most elegantly intelligent women I've ever met, and throughout the entire interview she was so humble and so willing to answer our questions and so elegant and precise as what she was saying. And then when the interview ended, she asked us what we wanted to do, and I remember kind of going into shock of thinking, here's this woman who's accomplished so much in her life and who is so intelligent asking us, nobody's students who have essentially done nothing yet in our lives, what we want to do. And we were going around the circle and talking about it, and I noticed people were saying, what they were good at, music or drawing or whatever it might be. And then I sort of had this realization of, the only thing I think I actually know well is women's soccer, and I'd never actually made the link of why haven't I even tried working in that field yet. I don't really think there's a design scene in there, but I'm sure there's something that I can get involved with. And it was a big moment for me to realize that, because that wasn't something that I'd thought of beforehand, and it was probably the first time in a couple years where I'd actually attempted to verbalize what I want to do in my future. So it was a big moment for me during the trip. Throughout the 4 weeks we were there, we kept asking the designers, what is design? And one of the common responses we kept getting back was, design is about helping people. And as simple as a response as it is, it made the most sense to me, because it sort of makes sense to me as to why, you know, are we creating all these forks and knives and chairs and tables, but if you're going into a project like that with the perspective of I'm doing it to help people instead of I'm creating this chair just because it looks nice, I think it makes what you're doing worthwhile. And this links back to, for me, what Gijs Bakker was saying about this idea of being oversensitive to the world around you and very visual in the way that you look at things, where in order to help people, you have to know what your surrounding is and what the culture is. And he was mentioning how to be a successful designer, you have to have this oversensitivity of, you know, why is this chair the way that it is? Why is this doorknob the way that it is? Why are they, you know, why is there rubber here? Why is there ceramic there? And without that, you can't be a designer because you don't know what your surrounding is, so how can you design for the people around you? So those two responses definitely made a lot of sense to me and will probably impact what I do in the future.